Hello, friends, and happy season premiere. That's right, we're right here on the Boom Broadcasting for our second season of It Stinks. And the one thing about this episode is all the shows have just started dropping for us to watch. We had Chicago last week, who kicked off a great Wednesday night. Squid Games on Netflix is going on with season two. Can't forget how good season one of the Squid Games were. Silo episode 9 dropped last Friday. Episode 10 drops this Friday to close out their season of Silo on the Apple TV. FBI's coming back. The Rookie on ABC is coming back. 911 is taking off on ABC. 911 Lone Star is wrapping up on Fox. Could it get picked up by another channel? We don't know. It's Sean. It stinks. It's Thursday. Why don't we go ahead and dive right into it? Hit the theme song. Let's go, Boom Broadcasting.
Quiet on the set. Can we please have quiet on the set?
It stinks.
What a great week to come back right here on It Stinks after a great Chicago night on Wednesday night. Chicago, and I have to use this word for a better lack of terms, was fire. Not Chicago fire, but all three episodes were fire. They started off picking up on Chicago Med, where we left off at in November before the holidays, before the Thanksgiving break, going into the Christmas holidays. The key thing was, would Miss Goodwin live, and would Dr. Dean be able to get back to make the rescue? We find out, spoiler alert, spoiler alert, spoiler alert, we find out that Dean was able to get off the elevator, get back up the steps, save Dr. Goodwin from dying. The young lady who was trying to kill Dr. Goodwin, that had mistakenly killed her lover, because she had to make a cautious decision in the medical field. They have to make those decisions. Who life? They don't buy you whose life is more important, but which patient has a better chance of surviving versus another patient. As you know, episode 2 of Chicago Med put Mrs. Goodwin, Nurse Goodwin, because she went back to being a nurse that night, in that situation to make that very tough decision. So we wrap things up with her about to die. Dean comes back in the first episode of the new season, saves Miss Goodwin from dying, rushed her to the hospital, performed the surgery, and took charge. Now you got to remember, Emily, who is the new dean and director of emergency director, operating doctor, the pretty much head of the ER, was not on this episode. It was all about Dean, the redemption for Dean. Losing the ER, losing the job, saving Miss Goodwin, performing the surgery, having to make a very drastic call on operating table that saved her life. When her boyfriend, who is a doctor at Gaffney, and her daughter did not want Dean to do this surgery, Dean made an audible, called an audible right there in the operating room. Natalie was very upset. She was like, "What are you doing, Dean?" Dean did something he had to do. He thought outside about saving Miss Goodwin's life. And the show ended great. Because ended with him, Miss Goodwin, how it started. Having that talk. As you know, the season finale, Dean had turned in his resignation to leave Gaffney. Miss Goodwin got the resignation because her daughter went and gave it to her. She had read it during recovery. Dean did not know that she had got it. Dean goes in, and what happens? She said, "Dean, there's only one thing I need you to do. Don't resign. I need you. Gaffney needs you, but I need you more important than Gaffney." What a good send off. Dean is staying. And I was a little bit upset because Dean is like one of the last Mohegans, besides Natalie, that is hanging in there. That is a Mohegan, one of the OGs on the show. And Dean is not like that. Now, Natalie's been there for a long time. I mean, not Natalie, Maggie. Lord, I'm thinking about Natalie that used to be there. He's gone. Maggie. Maggie's been there since day one. Dean was like that season 4, three, four, five recurring, four recurring, five a main. Dean is like, those were like the last two mains. So I didn't want to see Dean leave because then it would have been Maggie as the last OG of the original cast. Dean is staying. Of course, Dr. Miss Goodwin is one of the OGs. She's been there since day one with Chicago Med. So those are the core ones that I don't want to see depart the show. So when I found out Dean was leaving, I really was upset. So I'm glad that Dean didn't stay just for one episode, but staying for the remainder of the season. Now we jump over to Chicago Fire. Another great episode. We open up Chicago Fire knowing at the last episode that Mouch and Herman was going to take the test. Mouch was going to take the lieutenant's test. Herman was going to take the captain's test. They're trying to set Herman up to be the new battalion chief of 51. Well, of course, Herman's got some more obstacles he has to overcome to become the battalion chief. And this was a great episode because the past two seasons, well, last season started this season, it's been Mouch's redemption story. And I really like when shows go on that guy who's not a main guy. He's a main character. His name is in the main credits. He's on the casting call when they film, all of that stuff. But he's one of those guys that is like the fourth or fifth guy on the main show. You know, he's not the guy. And now with all of the great characters going on Chicago, except Severai still left, Bowden now is recurring. Herman's now stepping up, and Mouch is stepping up to take those spots. You know, I always say when Casey left, it was going to open up the door. Who was going to be that next person that Dick Wolf makes the star on that show? And he went with the one we did not expect. I really said it was going to be Severai. Unfortunately, Kid, like Kid as an actor, just don't like Kid's character. And I thought it'd be Herman. I thought Mouch would still be that one that is straggling along, hanging along to be the one that when we need an episode when somebody dies, is Mouch. And we had that one episode when Mouch, we thought he died from that explosion when he was bleeding on the bed, but we know he bounced back. From that episode to where we're at now, the whole season, Mouch went on a redemption tour, rediscovering himself, repurposing himself. And I thought Dick Wolf did very good with writing that. Another great episode. Severai is getting ready to go back, do a little fire investigating, fire inspector. You got the new chief over 51. He still got some stuff going on in his life that's kind of bothering him from when he was in Miami. Herman's on that road. He is a captain now. Mouch is a lieutenant. Good send-off on the first episode and not have Kid be there. She was gone with Girls on Fire somewhere. So Mouch was able to kind of have that one episode. What was the Mouch episode? He drove the truck. He led the calls. He made the calls. He finally had that first fire scene. And like Herman, he said, Herman, I've been here for a lot of years. I never knew it was that much. I truly enjoyed it. Very good Chicago Fire. Then we jump over to PD. Great Chicago PD. Open up with the one story. One thing I like about PD is every character have their one episode. Not like Med, not like Fire. Med, everybody's all in. Fire, you get everybody all in, but every now and then they do side stories, and most of the side stories are with Severai. You start to see now that Mouch and Herman are going to have some side stories outside of the main story of the episode. But one thing about PD is every character gets their one episode where it's about them solving the case. And this is what we got on this week's PD. This episode was the Toya Turner episode, Officer Kingdom Cook, who kind of was caught in a limbo because she's helping her dad who owns a hardware store. Her dad and mom are divorced. We don't know no backing story about her besides she's just somebody who got on the intelligence squad. She went from patrol to intelligence. We do know she was in another division, but got booted back to patrol, and Voight picked her up for intelligence because he thought she was a good officer. So we get a good story with her this week. She solves the case. It's pretty much her leading the case. She's put hours in on the study. Great episode of PD. A lot of not that much Voight. Voight kind of just more of a leader role in this episode. But it was good because, like I said on PD, everybody gets their one episode. Where's their story? She ran into a robbery, ran into a guy who hit somebody, started the case, solved the case, had a good reward at the end. Very good way to open up Chicago. To me, out of all three of them, if I had to rank them, Med was one, PD was second, then Fire. Yes, PD and Fire. Most time, PD always comes in first place on my ranking, but I really thought Med had more of that heartstringing storyline that just gravitated you to the Chicago franchise day Wednesday night, last Wednesday. Can't wait to talk about this week's episode of Chicago that dropped last night on next week's episode of It Stinks. Well, before we get out of here, we said so many new shows. Silo is getting ready to wrap up. Episode 9 dropped on Friday night. We're going to be watching that one Friday night, and we're going to be watching 10 live on Friday. And we may not do a live stream, but we're going to call it a live tweet. So we'll be putting some time out there. I'm watching Silo. And if you tune in and watch it, we'll be tweeting about it on the X machine, the Twitter machine, tweeting about it on that. Now, before we get out of here, two more things I got to talk about. Squid Games Season 2. Oh, baby, just take me. I'm ready to play the games. If you have not seen Season 1 of Squid Games, you have missed a treat. Arguably one of the best storyline shows I watched in a long time. And I say that a lot, but I say it very loosely, but not with Squid Games. From episode 1 to 9, it just takes you on a ride. You learn about the hero's journey. And that's one thing I learned back in college when I was in theater writing class. The hero's journey. Everybody wants the hero to go on that journey of redemption. Dick Wolf does very good with it on Chicago Fire. You're seeing that with Mouse now. He does good with it. You want to see the hero overcome. You want to see him go through trials. And that's what we got in Squid Game Season 1. Just a quick synopsis. You got a guy who's a gambler. He starts off as a bad guy. You're like, this is the antagonist. It's not the protagonist of the show. He's going to be the antagonist. He's the bad guy. He asks his mother for money. He's divorced from his wife. His kids living with his wife. His wife has remarried another person. And he asks his mother for money to take his daughter out to a nice dinner and buy a nice birthday present. Well, what does he do with the money? He gambles it and goes and gambles it on horse racing. But he ends up having his big day. And you're like, okay, this could be the hero. Here's the story we've been waiting on. He has the big day where he wins the money, but he ended up getting pickpocketed. And all that sets over him entering the Squid Games and winning the Squid Games and becoming from the guy who was the low-life gambler you didn't like to the unsung hero. Now, in his journey in Season 1, he does some shady things. Only one shady thing that kind of makes you work change. But after that, he has a change of heart again. And he continues on the journey. But his best friend, guess what? He becomes the antagonist because he's the one who you're supposed to be cheering for, who becomes the villain of the show by any means necessary to try to win the money. Great show. I mean, hands down, best storytelling every episode. It keeps you on your seat. Emotional roller coaster. Season 2 has been the same way. Soon as Season 2 wraps up, we'll be breaking down Season 2 Squid Games right here on It Stinks. And also, It Stinks fan, this is the exclusive right here. Not only have I been watching TV to give you this content on It Stinks, but now we're going to do a segment called the It Stinks Book Club. Yes, I picked up a book and I read a great book over the past 2 weeks. And it is the book, the memoir wrote by Jaleel White, Growing Up Urkel. You all know him as Steve Urkel. What a great book. He's telling his story, and it's a great story he's telling because you're not only getting the life of being a child star, but the ups and downs it comes with being a child star. And from where I'm at, and I read the entire book, he didn't have that many downs, but being in the 7th grade and joining a group of stars to star in maybe one of the biggest TV shows in the 80s and 90s, late 80s, early 90s, Family Matters, he goes on a ride and he tells you his story from his eyes as a 7th grader all the way to a high school graduate, all the way to a college student, to the point where he could not keep playing the role because he had outgrown the role. And you see that a lot. We talk about it with cheerleaders. They outgrow their role. But a great story right there, great book. Highly recommend it. If you grew up in that late 80s, 90s, if you even now, it still comes on TV reruns. Everybody knows Stephen Q. Urkel. Everybody knows Family Matters. If you are a big fan of the show, like I was telling you, TGIF, thank God it's Friday. ABC lineup, 8 o'clock every Friday night. I was glued in front of the TV watching Family Matters. Even when I got into that high school era of going to the Friday Night Lights football games, playing on the Friday nights, I made sure Family Matters recorded on VHS so I could watch it when I got home or watch it on Saturday morning. Great book, highly recommended. Big fan of Family Matters, big fan of Jaleel White. He tells his story and he gives you the truth from his point of view, from his eye views of what he saw growing up as a child actor and being somebody who was in the original core of the Family Matters group to getting plugged in for one episode and knocking it out the park that one episode to getting moved to a recurring guy from a recurring to a main character, and the friction it had with a lot of the original cast who said, hey, we were here first, and now the whole show's done a 360 synopsis of what it was written for. Great book. I have truly enjoyed it. Something we're going to be doing right here on It Stinks. We're not only going to be talking about TV, we're going to be talking about books, and we may even do a It Stinks book review right here on the Boom Broadcast. That's right, you heard it first. We may be doing a book review and we may be doing the Jaleel White book. So definitely be tuned in for that if you are an advocate book reader and just love great memoirs of people as they tell their story. This is Sean. This is It Stink, and I'm out of here.